Is it just me, or do we all have that one shirt that you just can't seem to part with? This shirt's been with me for about 50 pounds now, all the way from when I started my powerlifting journey, probably at 165 pounds. Here I am, hovering around 205. We've been up to 210, 212, so this is a 50-pound shirt, tank top, and it's starting to show the first signs of a hole, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to part with it. What do? Do you throw the shirts out as soon as you get a hole in it, or do you kind of wear it till it wears out? Someone here from WynnStrength.com, bringing you the first day of the 5th week of the Darkhorse Training Program by Brian Alsruhe. Like usual, I'll leave links below for Brian Alsruhe's video outlining the program and explaining exactly what happens and how to do the program yourself. I'll also leave links for the Lift Vault website, where they've actually taken out a lot of the hard spreadsheet work and created a free spreadsheet online that you can use if you want to do this program yourself. So first day back, 5th week, we're starting off like usual with lower body day. We're starting off with some conditioning, really quick, 45 off, 15 on, interval training on the rower, but you can obviously do whatever you want. Again, the conditioning is really simple, just something to elevate. It's like a pseudo conditioning, pseudo warm-up, so just whatever you have available to use for a conditioning tool. I like the rowing machine for lower body days, as well as maybe some jumps here and there, but I kind of alternate that throughout the week. The fifth week is halfway through the second phase, so we've changed a lot of the movements from the first week to the second week, from the first phase to the second phase, and we are just mixing up for some variety, changing up the movement, changing up the body angles, just to introduce some new stimulus to the body. So the main movements for today for the max effort work was 4 sets. Started off with some Romanian deadlifts. I wanted to stay in the higher rep range for this movement, because last week we were slightly lower reps. So with the weight, we used 225 pounds. We did that for 15 reps all the way across the 4 sets. So a good 60 reps at 225 pounds. I think it's a great way to get some blood flowing to the lower back and the hamstrings. What I would advise is, me personally, I go to just below the knee joint. You'll see in the videos, and I try and keep the lower back as tensed and as arched as possible. Kind of different to the regular deadlift form that I use. So obviously we're doing 2 kind of different movements. I like to start from the floor with the RDLs. I'm not a big fan of the walkout. Just personal preference, whichever one you prefer. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do it. Originally, the dude that did it, I guess, walked it out of a rack, so if you want to stick with tradition, otherwise just put on the ground. One of the other reasons why I don't want to use it in the rack is because I only have 1 set of J-cups, and that would get occupied by the RDLs, and I wouldn't be able to do squats. So there you go, there's a justification for not picking it up out of the rack. But nevertheless, what I like to do with my form is to keep the lower back as tight and arched as possible, and then keep my knees as loose but as upright as possible, if that makes sense. So when you stretch down, almost like you're trying to touch your toes, so you should feel a really good stretch in the hamstrings. That's where I feel it mainly. But what I have noticed is when I bend the knees too much, or I let the weight go down too far, or I don't keep the lower back as extended as I should, so arched like that. You want to stick the butt out and then bend down. When I don't do that, I notice there is a disengagement of the hamstrings, and I'm not too sure where I'm feeling it as much. So I prefer to definitely keep the mind-muscle connection a little bit stronger here, since it is an RDL and accessory movement where I like to focus on just getting a bit more mind-muscle connection with that movement. And this is a really good movement for the hamstrings for me personally, since I don't have really any hamstring device in here. I don't have a GHR or a leg curl machine or anything like that. So the RDL is really my main movement in order to build the hamstrings directly. And that means I need to find ways, and you should find ways to do the movement so you can really feel the stretch in that muscle, so that you know you're targeting that muscle more directly than if you engage some other muscles in the movement. With all that being said, I think it's a great way to get some pump in the hamstrings, and it's a good offset to a good opposite movement, antagonist movement to the second movement, which was the pause squat with the SS yoke bar. You notice that, if you remember, or if you've watched it, in the 4th week, so the first week of the second phase, I did the pause squats with a regular barbell. Towards the end of last week, I had some issues at work just with my arm moved a little weirdly, and it aggravated something. Usually when I feel pain in the inner bicep, that's when I know it's kind of linked to the shoulder. So for the sake of safety and like injury pain prevention, I opted to use the SS yoke bar again, just because I know that when I use that, there's pretty much zero shoulder issues at all, just because we're not putting the shoulder blades in that retracted position. They're kind of neutral, and we're not having to really externally rotate the shoulders that hard to get the arms back around the bar. They're kind of out here in front of you so that it takes some pressure off that shoulder joint. Something to think about if you do have access to an SSB bar or an SS yoke bar or some similar shaped barbell at your gym, or if you're contemplating getting a new specialty bar, highly recommend getting the SS yoke bar. I've owned mine for just over a year now, so a review will be coming up soon, so I can give you my thoughts after over a year of actual use. But nevertheless, we did switch up to the SS yoke bar, so the weights probably won't transfer over too well. But we did hit the 5 rep maxes. We worked our way from 240, 250, 260, and finally we had top set at 270 for sets of 5 with, I guess you could call it, a slight pause at the bottom. Generally when I do these, and I'm being brutally honest, when I pause, it's really not an officially good pause by any means. It's probably just a slight stagger, if you will. If you were better, you would definitely pause for a lot longer. I should be doing that, but yeah, is what it is, I guess. Then we wrap that up with some V-ups and just some air jumps, nothing crazy. Yeah, the V-ups are coming along just fine, and just jumping to get that cardio going. So that wraps up max effort for today. Again, 4 sets, with RDLs and SSB pause squats. Now move on to the volume work for today. And if I read the program correctly last week, I would notice that we did go back to box squats for the volume work. So last week I continued with the pause squats at the thing, and then now we're going back to box squats, which is what the program prescribes. So we did, again, RDLs. We did drop the volume down. So instead of doing 15 reps, I did 12 reps just because some fatigue was setting in. Again, there's a lot of volume and a lot of tonnage in this program, so I had to temper that somehow, and my conditioning just isn't keeping up. So 225 for 12, and then we move on to box squats again with the SSB bar, just mainly because the SSB bar is already in the rack and I don't want to change it. And again, couple that with the shoulder management issues, so nothing crazy there. We just did 215 for sets of 10, and then again V-ups and jumps. The prescribed reps were 10 for the first AMRAP set. I like to always aim for 2, but I only got 10, but at least we hit that minimum floor, which was fine. And today we did modify the program again. I did drop off that last set of the volume work just because time was starting to run down again, and I'm really trying to be more cognizant of the amount of time I'm spending in the gym. I really want to keep that definitely under an hour and a half, ideally an hour and 15, if I can, an hour. But I think an hour is unreasonable. An hour 15, an hour 20 is really right where I want to be. So for the sake of time interest, I cut out the last set there, so we only got 2 sets of volume work, so that we could include the dynamic effort work. Something I would say is when you're looking at training and training outcomes, for the sake of 1 set of volume work, I would say I would prefer to introduce that dynamic effort work so we do get that different training stimulus. Mainly because the way the template and the program is set up is that we do have 4 distinct phases or 4 distinct stages in the day's workout: conditioning, max effort, volume, dynamic. If time is not on your side, I would recommend to at least hit all 3, but not as much volume for each. So if you were running short on time, like really short on time, cut out a set from the max effort and the volume, and even cut out some of the dynamic effort, but at least touch each of those segments of the day's workout, just so you do adapt and you do expose the body to that training stimulus, because getting another volume set in won't be as beneficial in the program's eyes, I believe, as getting at least 5 sets of that dynamic effort movement, because The max effort and the volume really ignores that speed work, that explosiveness. And then when you do throw in that dynamic work, you do get in that explosive and dynamic stimulus and the speed training that is otherwise neglected. And by ignoring that, we kind of leaving one of the factors of the program out of our training. So rather than trying to add in some more and try and take away a little bit, otherwise you could also really stick to those rest periods, or even reduce the rest periods to 30 seconds and really drop down that weight. But that's, I would recommend personally, like what I'm doing, cut out a couple, like 1 or 2 sets out of the tail end of each of the segments so that you can make it through the workout with relatively heavy weights. That being said, we're wrapping up with deadlifts, 10-minute EMOM like usual. And for the sake of keeping the speed up, I have been focusing on wanting to make sure my speed maintains throughout the entire sets across. Very difficult. Obviously, the first half is quite easy, and the tail end of this dynamic effort EMOM is really difficult because of that shortening of the rest period. So what I tend to do is to just drop the weight down a fair amount. So this is under 50%. Under 50% on my last tested 1 rep max. I think I need to bring that up to about at least 50% so that we do get that training, get more of that weight in there. But we are using some bands, so I do have 225 with some bands. I'm not too sure what the elastic energy is in the bands is. I need to find that sheet from Elite FTS which shows the weights. I'll just look it up. But at the very least, I noticed from the first phase is that when I started adding heavy and heavy weights, my speed was slowing down for the dynamic effort nature of the workout. So I did want to drop the weight down and really focus on bringing back that speed to this aspect of the program. So we did 225. We did make it through all 10 minutes, and it didn't take any longer. So we did stick to that rest period, which was great. Something I really want to focus on. And actually, today's workout only took 1 hour and 22 minutes. So nice and under that 90-minute mark. I'm really happy with that result. And I think we're trailing really well for this program. I think the first phase kind of set the groundwork, kind of sucked a little bit. And now we're into the meat of the program. I think my body slowly is actually showing some signs of adaptation as I'm able to stick to that rest period and stick to that conditioning for the program. One thing I would recommend is if you are doing the program, I don't think you need to add in any extra conditioning work because of how intense the program itself is. This doesn't, not to say that you shouldn't be physically active outside of the gym. Obviously, be as active as you possibly want, but I wouldn't worry about introducing extra GPP days or extra cardio work if it's not part of your goal. So if you're training for, say, a marathon or training to play football, something along those lines, obviously continue with those pursuits and hobbies, but I wouldn't worry about trying to fit in a HIIT day or a GPP day where you specifically do, say, rowing for intervals or things of that nature. I don't think it's necessary when you do a program like this because it's kind of inbuilt into the program. One of the things I've changed my mind about with this program is that block periodization style training. Yes, I think it's great, but I think this conjugate style training can also be thrown in to your training cycle, much like how you do block periodization for a time. Maybe you do block periodization for a period of time, and then you introduce some conjugate style training, and then you introduce maybe we block periodize different styles of training over the course of a year or over the course of several years. So over this long-term training cycle, 5-year training cycle, we're actually able to introduce some different stimulus and introduce different ways to attack a problem where all these other people have also experienced some good results out of it. People have been successful with block period. People have been successful with conjugate. People have been successful with all sorts of types of different training. So to say one is better than the other is kind of making it really arbitrary and really a hard line in the sand, which obviously we all know the world is more complex than that. So look at your own training, try something different. If it interests you, if you're curious about it, try it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks next time you are done with the training block. So if you're on a 12-week program right now, finish that out. At the end of that 12 weeks, take that rest week, and then maybe experiment with 4 weeks of a different style of training. You never know, you might be able to find something that will help you or find something that will push you harder than you've been pushed before. Like usual, I'll leave a playlist right here for the Darkhorse training program, so you can keep up to date with what I'm doing for the Darkhorse program, as well as how my results are going to pan out after 5 weeks. 5 more weeks of training, and we'll see what happens. We'll do some testing and try out some fun stuff. This has been Selwyn from WynnStrength, and remember, a better life through strength.